The Nevada sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty airfield outside of Reno, turning the tarmac into a shimmering mirror of heat. It was the summer of 1943, and the war effort had turned every corner of America into a factory of innovation, desperation, and dreams. But here, at this forgotten military testing facility, those dreams were about to be laughed out of existence. Tommy Reeves wiped the grease from his calloused hands onto his worn coveralls and stepped back to admire his work. The modified Willys Jeep sat there like a mechanical oddity, its frame reinforced with welded steel plates, and mounted on its hood were 6 repurposed HVR rockets salvaged from damaged Navy fighters. They pointed skyward at a 45-degree angle, jury-rigged to a firing mechanism Tommy had cobbled together from spare parts and sheer stubbornness. He was 28 years old, too young to feel this tired, too old to still be chasing impossible ideas. His face was lean and weathered, marked by too many nights in the garage and too many rejections from the brass. His dark hair stuck to his forehead with sweat, and his green eyes held that particular mix of hope and defiance that comes from being told no 1,000 times. Behind him, the laughter started low and spread like wildfire. Colonel Richard Hastings, a barrel-chested man with a perfectly pressed uniform and a mustache that looked regulation sharp, stood with his arms crossed. Beside him were 3 other officers, each one looking at Tommy's creation with barely concealed amusement. Well, Hastings drawled, his Texas accent thick as molasses. What in the Sam Hill is that supposed to be, Reeves? Tommy straightened his back, trying to project more confidence than he felt. Sir, this is a mobile anti-aircraft platform. I call it the Sky Hunter. It can be deployed rapidly, costs a fraction of what traditional AA guns cost. And the colonel cut him off with a bark of laughter that echoed across the empty field. Son, that looks like you strapped fireworks to a farm truck and called it a weapon. This is the United States military, not a county fair. The other officers joined in, their laughter sharp and dismissive. One of them, a younger captain with slicked-back blonde hair, shook his head. Reeves, you've been pitching crazy ideas for 6 months now. The jet-powered bicycle, the parachute mine, and now this. When are you going to accept that you're just a mechanic, not an engineer? Tommy felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice steady. With respect, sir, every major innovation in this war started as a crazy idea. Somebody had to be the first to. Hastings raised a hand, silencing him. Save it. We've got real work to do, Reeves. Radar systems, bomber formations, actual strategic weapons. Not toys built in a shed. You've got 48 hours to clear this thing off my airfield and get back to doing what you're paid for, fixing engines and changing oil. The words hit harder than any physical blow could have. Tommy had spent 3 months on this project, every spare moment, every cent of his meager savings. He had believed, truly believed, that he could contribute something meaningful to the war effort, something that would save lives. But sir, just give me one test run. One chance to. The answer is no, Hastings said flatly. And that's final. Dismissed, mechanic. The officers walked away, their laughter fading into the administrative buildings. Tommy stood there alone with his creation, feeling the weight of their mockery settle on his shoulders like lead. Around the airfield, other soldiers had stopped their work to watch the spectacle. Some looked away quickly, embarrassed for him. Others smirked and whispered. A hand clapped on his shoulder, and Tommy turned to see Jake Morrison, his only real friend on the base. Jake was a radio operator, thin and wiry with thick glasses and a perpetual expression of worry etched into his young face. Tough break, Tommy, Jake said quietly. But maybe they're right. Maybe it's time to let this one go. Tommy looked back at his Jeep, at the rockets he had carefully calibrated, at the firing system he had tested dozens of times in secret. He thought about the newsreels he had seen, the bombers falling from the sky, the ships burning in harbors because anti-aircraft defenses were too slow, too expensive, too few. He thought about his brother, David, a pilot somewhere over the Pacific, flying a rickety B-24 through flak and enemy fighters every single day. No, Tommy said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm not letting this go. Not yet. Jake sighed. What are you going to do? Tommy pulled a crumpled telegram from his pocket. one he had received 2 days ago through back channels. It was from an old Air Corps buddy now stationed in California, warning of increased Japanese reconnaissance flights along the coast, probing defenses, testing response times. "I'm going to prove them all wrong," Tommy said, "even if I have to do it alone." The next morning, Tommy was summoned to Colonel Hastings' office. The walk across the base felt like a death march. Other soldiers glanced at him with pity or amusement, and he could hear fragments of whispered conversations as he passed. "That's Rocket Boy. Heard the colonel tore him a new one yesterday. Guy thinks he's Howard Hughes or something. Just a grease monkey with delusions." Tommy kept his eyes forward, his jaw clenched tight. When he entered the office, Hastings was seated behind his massive oak desk, flanked by the same officers from yesterday. But this time, there was someone new. A stern-looking woman in a crisp army uniform with the insignia of a technical liaison officer. "Reeves," Hastings began without preamble, "I've been reviewing your service record. 3 years on this base, and what do I see? Insubordination, unauthorized use of materials, wasting military resources on pet projects." The woman here, Lieutenant Patricia Chun from the War Department's Innovation Review Board, has been investigating complaints about your conduct. Tommy's heart sank. Lieutenant Chun stepped forward, her expression unreadable. Her dark eyes were sharp, analytical. She carried a thick folder under her arm. "Mechanic Reeves," she said, her voice clipped and professional. "Over the past 6 months, you have requisitioned materials worth over $3,000 in military equipment. Rockets, steel plating, electrical components, all signed out under false work orders. That constitutes theft of military property during wartime. Do you understand the severity of these charges?" The room seemed to tilt. Tommy gripped the back of a chair to steady himself. "Ma'am, I can explain. Every part one used was salvage, damaged goods that would have been scrapped anyway. I was trying to what?" Hastings interrupted, his voice rising. "Play inventor while real soldiers are dying overseas. Your brother is out there risking his life every day, and you're here in Nevada building contraptions like a child with an erector set." The mention of David felt like a knife twisting in Tommy's gut. "Don't you dare bring my brother into this," he said, his voice shaking with anger. "Everything I've done has been to help soldiers like him, to give them a fighting chance." The captain with the slicked-back hair scoffed. "A Jeep with rockets isn't going to win this war. Reeves, you're not Thomas Edison. You're a mechanic who got too big for his britches." Lieutenant Chun opened her folder and pulled out several documents. "I have witness statements here from supply sergeants, engineers, and fellow mechanics, all documenting your unauthorized activities. The recommendation from this base is for a court-martial, followed by dishonorable discharge and possible imprisonment." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Tommy felt his world collapsing around him. A dishonorable discharge would destroy any hope of a future, any chance of redemption. His family would be ashamed. His brother would never forgive him. However, Lieutenant Chun continued, her tone softening slightly, "I've also reviewed the technical specifications you submitted for your projects. While unorthodox and wildly inappropriate in their execution, some of your ideas show genuine mechanical insight. The parachute mine concept, while impractical, demonstrated an understanding of delayed deployment systems. Your modifications to the base's transport trucks improved fuel efficiency by 11%. She paused, studying him carefully. "So I'm offering you a choice, Mechanic Reeves. Accept a summary demotion, pay restitution for the materials from your salary over the next 2 years, and abandon all unauthorized projects immediately. Or face court-martial. You have 60 seconds to decide." Tommy looked around the room at the faces staring back at him. Hastings wore an expression of smug satisfaction. The other officers looked bored, already mentally moving on to their next task. Only Lieutenant Chen's face showed something else, something that might have been curiosity or perhaps the faintest hint of respect. He thought about his Skyhunter, sitting out there on the airfield, loaded and ready. He thought about the telegram warning of enemy aircraft. He thought about David, somewhere over the Pacific, depending on people like him to innovate, to push boundaries, to refuse to accept defeat. But he also thought about his mother back in Ohio, a widow who had already lost her husband to the First World War. He thought about what a court-martial would do to her, the shame it would bring to their family name. "I accept the demotion," Tommy finally said, his voice hollow. "And the restitution." Hastings smiled. "Smart choice, Reeves. Now get that junk heap off my airfield by sundown, or I'll have it bulldozed into scrap." "Dismissed." Tommy saluted mechanically and turned to leave. As he reached the door, Lieutenant Chen's voice stopped him. "Mechanic Reeves," she said quietly, "for what it's worth, the world needs dreamers. But it also needs dreamers who understand the chain of command." He nodded without turning around and walked out into the blinding Nevada sun, feeling more alone than he had ever felt in his life. Tommy spent the rest of that day in a haze of defeat. He sat beside his Skyhunter, running his hands over the welded seams, the carefully aligned rockets, the firing mechanism he had perfected through countless iterations. All of it, everything he had poured his heart into, was about to become scrap metal. Jake found him there as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the Nevada desert in shades of orange and purple. "Hey," Jake said softly, sitting down beside him on the Jeep's running board. "I heard what happened." "I'm sorry, Tommy. I really am." Tommy didn't respond. He just stared at his creation, memorizing every detail, knowing that by tomorrow it would be gone. They sat in silence for a while until the distinctive wail of the base alarm shattered the evening quiet. Both men jumped to their feet as the siren's urgent cry echoed across the airfield. Soldiers poured out of buildings, running toward their stations. A Jeep screeched to a halt beside them, and a young private leaned out, his face pale with excitement and fear. Unidentified aircraft approaching from the west. Radar picked up 6 bogies, 20 miles out and closing fast. All personnel to defensive positions. Tommy's heart began to pound. Jake grabbed his arm. "Come on, we need to get to the shelters." But Tommy wasn't moving. He was staring at his Skyhunter, then at the western sky where the sun was setting. 6 aircraft, 20 miles out. The base's standard anti-aircraft guns were positioned on the eastern perimeter, protecting against the more likely threat from that direction. The western approach was virtually undefended, considered too unlikely for a proper attack route. "Tommy," Jake's voice was urgent now. "We have to go." Instead, Tommy climbed into the driver's seat of his Jeep. The keys were still in the ignition where he had left them. His hands moved with sudden purpose, checking the rocket alignment, testing the firing mechanism one last time. "What are you doing?" Jake shouted over the continuing alarm. "What I should have done from the beginning," Tommy replied, his voice steady now, filled with a calm certainty. "Proving them all wrong. You'll be court-martialed for sure. This is direct disobedience." Tommy started the engine. The Jeep roared to life. "Maybe. But if those are enemy planes and they hit this base, there won't be anyone left to court-martial me. Get to the shelter, Jake. Please." Jake hesitated for only a moment, then made his decision. He ran around and jumped into the passenger seat. "Then I'm coming with you. You'll need someone to spot and reload if this crazy thing actually works." Tommy looked at his friend, gratitude flooding through him. "Thank you." They drove toward the western edge of the base, the Jeep bouncing over rough terrain. Behind them, chaos erupted as soldiers scrambled to defensive positions. Colonel Hastings' voice boomed over the base loudspeaker system, barking orders, coordinating the response. Tommy positioned the Jeep on a small rise that gave them a clear view of the western sky. He killed the engine and stood up, scanning the horizon. The sun was lower now, making it harder to see, but then Jake pointed. "They're 11 o'clock high." Tommy spotted them, 6 dark shapes against the fading light, flying in a tight formation. They were too far away to identify clearly, but their approach pattern was all wrong for friendly aircraft. They were coming in low and fast, the classic profile of a surprise attack run. His hands moved to the firing controls. The rockets were aligned, the trajectory calculated based on months of testing. But this was different. This was real. Lives depended on what happened in the next few moments. "Come on, Tommy," Jake whispered beside him. "You can do this." Tommy watched the aircraft approach, calculating distance, speed, angle. His engineering mind ran through the numbers automatically. 1,500 yards. 1,400. 1,300. The lead plane was breaking formation, beginning its attack run toward the base's fuel depot. 1,200 yards. Now, Tommy pressed the first firing button. The rocket launched with a deafening roar, a trail of white smoke arcing across the darkening sky. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the rocket connected with the lead aircraft, and the sky erupted in a ball of orange flame. The enemy plane disintegrated, pieces raining down onto the desert floor. Holy God, Jake breathed. You actually hit it. But Tommy was already adjusting, tracking the second plane as it broke formation in confusion. He fired again. Another hit. Another plane tumbling from the sky in flames. If you're watching this and you can't believe what's happening, hit that subscribe button right now because this story is about to get even more incredible. Tommy Reeves is just getting started. The remaining 4 aircraft scattered. Their surprise attack turned into desperate evasion. Tommy tracked the third plane, fired, and watched it spiral downward, trailing black smoke. 3 down. 3 to go. The 4th aircraft banked hard to the south, trying to escape the kill zone. Tommy swung the Jeep around, the remaining rockets tracking the target. His hands were steady now, all doubt burned away by the urgency of the moment. He squeezed the trigger. The rocket streaked across the sky and caught the plane's tail section, sending it into an uncontrollable spin. For down. The last 2 planes regrouped, clearly trying to make sense of what was destroying their formation. They were close enough now that Tommy could see the red circles on their wings. Japanese reconnaissance bombers, exactly as his contact had warned. They must have launched from a submarine off the California coast, probing inland defenses. One of the planes suddenly dove toward them, machine guns blazing. Bullets kicked up dirt all around the Jeep. Jake threw himself flat, but Tommy stood his ground, tracking the attacking aircraft with his 5th rocket. "Get down, you idiot!" Jake screamed. "Not yet," Tommy muttered. "Just a little closer." The plane was coming straight at them, its guns flashing. Tommy could see the pilot's face now, twisted with concentration and rage. 300 yards, Tommy fired. The rocket shot forward like a thunderbolt and struck the plane's engine cowling. The explosion was massive, so close that Tommy felt the heat wash over him. Burning debris rained down around the Jeep. The 6th and final aircraft turned tail and ran, climbing desperately for altitude and distance. Tommy had 1 rocket left. He made the calculations in his head. Maximum range. Extreme angle. The probability of a hit was maybe 20%. He fired anyway. The rocket climbed and climbed, its white trail drawing a perfect arc across the now dark sky. For what felt like an eternity, nothing happened. Then, miles away, a small flash of light. The plane staggered, began to lose altitude. It wasn't a kill shot, but it was enough. The crippled aircraft limped away toward the horizon, trailing smoke, clearly unable to complete its mission. Silence fell over the desert, broken only by the crackling of burning wreckage and the distant wail of fire trucks racing toward the crash sites. Tommy sat down heavily on the Jeep's hood, his legs suddenly unable to support him. His hands were shaking now, the adrenaline draining away and leaving him hollow. Jake slowly stood up, his face covered in dust, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You did it," Jake whispered. "You actually did it. 6 planes. 3 days of attacks prevented. Tommy, you just saved this entire base." Behind them, headlights approached rapidly. A convoy of military vehicles screeched to a halt, and Colonel Hastings jumped out, his face purple with a mixture of rage and something else. Something that might have been awe. "Reeves, what in the name of all that's holy did you just do?" Tommy stood at attention, expecting the worst. "Sir, I engaged enemy aircraft threatening the base. 6 confirmed hits with the mobile anti-aircraft platform. The threat has been neutralized." Hastings stared at him, then at the burning wreckage visible in the distance, then back at Tommy. Other officers gathered around, including Lieutenant Chun, who had a pair of binoculars pressed to her eyes, scanning the crash sites. "I counted 6 launches," she said quietly. 6 targets engaged. 5 confirmed kills, 1 damaged and retreating. Using a jury-rigged weapons platform that cost less than $1,000 in salvage parts. She lowered the binoculars and looked at Tommy with something approaching wonder. "Colonel, I think we need to reassess our earlier evaluation." Hastings walked around the jeep slowly, examining the empty rocket tubes, the firing mechanism, the reinforced frame. His expression was unreadable. "Son, you just disobeyed a direct order. You took military equipment you were explicitly told to destroy and used it in combat without authorization." Tommy's heart sank. "Yes, sir. I understand, sir." But then Hastings did something unexpected. He extended his hand. "You also just saved dozens of lives and prevented what could have been a catastrophic attack on a critical military installation. That takes guts. And brains. And the kind of stubbornness that wins wars." Tommy shook the colonel's hand, barely believing what was happening. Lieutenant Chun stepped forward. "Mechanic Reeves, I'm recommending immediate promotion to technical sergeant and assignment to a new rapid development program. We need people who think outside the box. People who see solutions where others see junk piles." She smiled slightly. "People who build weapons on jeeps and take down enemy aircraft with them." Over the next hour, the base transformed around Tommy. Soldiers who had mocked him hours earlier now clapped him on the back, asking questions about the Skyhunter's design. Engineers swarmed over the jeep, taking measurements, making sketches. The young captain with the slicked-back hair actually apologized, admitting he had been wrong to dismiss the idea so quickly. Jake stood beside Tommy through all of it, grinning like a fool. "I told you that you could do it." "No," Tommy replied, looking at his friend. "You believed in me when no one else did. That made all the difference." The next 72 hours passed in a blur of activity that Tommy could barely process. The base that had mocked him was now treating him like a hero. Newspaper reporters arrived from Reno, then from San Francisco, then from as far as New York. Photographers captured every angle of the Skyhunter, and Tommy found himself explaining the design over and over to military engineers, War Department officials, and even a congressman who flew in specifically to see the weapon that had stopped a Japanese attack. But the real validation came on the 3rd morning after the attack, when Tommy was summoned to the communications building. Inside, a radio operator handed him a headset with trembling hands. "Sergeant Reeves, someone wants to speak with you. It's a direct line from the Pacific Theater." Tommy put on the headset, his heart racing. The connection crackled with static. Then a familiar voice came through, distant but unmistakable. "Tommy? Little brother, is that really you?" "David." Tommy's voice broke with emotion. "Oh God, David, you're alive. You're okay." His older brother laughed. That same warm laugh Tommy remembered from childhood. "More than okay, thanks to you apparently. Word travels fast out here. My kid brother, the guy everyone said was wasting his time in a garage, just took down 6 enemy planes with rockets on a jeep." "Tommy, do you have any idea what that means for us out here?" Tommy sat down, overwhelmed. "I just did what I thought was right. What you did was revolutionary." David's voice grew serious. "We're losing bombers every day because anti-aircraft defenses are too slow or too expensive to deploy where we need them. But your design, it's mobile, it's cheap, it's effective. The brass is already talking about mass production. You might have just changed how we fight this war." They talked for 20 minutes, the longest conversation they had had in 2 years. David told him about missions over the Pacific, about close calls and fallen friends. Tommy told him about the loneliness of being dismissed, of fighting to prove himself. When they finally said goodbye, both brothers had tears in their eyes. "I'm proud of you, Tommy," David said. "Dad would be proud too. You didn't give up. That's what counts." After the call ended, Lieutenant Chun found Tommy sitting alone in the communications room. She had a folder under her arm and an expression that was almost kind. "Sergeant Reeves, I owe you an apology. When I came here, I was prepared to see you court-martialed. I thought you were just another reckless soldier wasting resources. But you weren't reckless. You were right, and sometimes being right requires breaking a few rules." She opened the folder and pulled out official-looking documents. The War Department is establishing a new division, Rapid Combat Innovation. We're taking the 30 best mechanical minds in the military and giving them the freedom to develop unconventional weapons and tactics. You're being offered the position of lead engineer, full rank of lieutenant, carte blanche to requisition materials and build whatever you think will help us win this war." Tommy stared at the papers, unable to believe what he was reading. "Ma'am, I'm just a mechanic from Ohio. I don't have formal engineering training or—" "You have something better. You have intuition and the courage to trust it. That's worth more than a dozen degrees from MIT." She smiled. "Besides, the Skyhunter is already being replicated. 16 units are being built this week for coastal defense. By next month, we'll have 50. You've already saved lives, Reeves. Imagine what you could do with real support." Tommy signed the papers with shaking hands. As he did, Colonel Hastings entered the room. The colonel's demeanor had completely changed. Gone was the dismissive arrogance. In its place was genuine respect. "Lieutenant Reeves," Hastings said, testing out the new rank. "I was wrong about you. Dead wrong. I let my prejudice about rank and formal training blind me to real talent. That's a mistake I won't make again." He extended his hand again, and Tommy shook it firmly. "There's one more thing," Hastings added. "We recovered the pilot from the plane you damaged. He didn't make it, but he was carrying this." The colonel handed Tommy a leather-bound journal written in Japanese. "Our translators went through it. He was part of a larger reconnaissance operation. If those planes had completed their mission and reported back, we would have faced a major attack within the week. Hundreds of lives would have been lost. You didn't just defend this base. You prevented a massacre." Tommy held the journal, feeling the weight of what could have been. All those lives saved because he refused to give up on an idea everyone else called crazy. That night, the base held an impromptu celebration. Soldiers gathered around the Skyhunter, now a legend in its own right. Jake brought out a harmonica and played old songs while men sang and laughed under the Nevada stars. For the first time in years, Tommy felt like he belonged somewhere, like he had found his purpose. September 1945, Washington, D.C. 2 years had passed since that evening in the Nevada desert, and the world had changed in ways both terrible and wonderful. The war in Europe had ended in May. Japan had surrendered just weeks ago after the atomic bombs fell. The greatest conflict in human history was finally over, and America was beginning the long process of healing and rebuilding. Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Reeves stood in the Pentagon's Hall of Heroes, his uniform decorated with ribbons he never imagined he would earn. The Silver Star, the Legion of Merit, commendations from 3 different theater commanders. But none of that mattered as much as what he held in his hands. A letter from the Secretary of War himself. Beside him stood Jake Morrison, now a captain and Tommy's permanent partner in the Rapid Combat Innovation Division. They had spent 2 years developing weapons and systems that had genuinely changed the course of the war. Mobile rocket platforms, improved radar jamming devices, quick deployment bridge systems. Each innovation born from the same principle. Find the simple solution that everyone else overlooks. "Can you believe we're actually here?" Jake asked, adjusting his glasses nervously. 2 years ago, you were about to be court-martialed. Now you're receiving a presidential commendation. Tommy smiled. Sometimes the difference between a court-martial and a medal is just timing, and maybe a little bit of stubbornness. Lieutenant Chun, now a major and heading the entire Innovation Division, approached them with a warm smile. She had become not just a superior officer but a genuine friend, someone who understood the loneliness of seeing things differently than everyone else. "Gentlemen," she said, "the ceremony is about to begin. Tommy, your mother and brother are already seated. David looks good. He told me he's getting married next spring." Tommy's heart swelled. David had made it home. After 53 combat missions over the Pacific, his brother had survived and was now building a life in peacetime. That alone made everything worthwhile. The ceremony was simple but moving. General Marshall himself presented Tommy with the commendation, speaking about innovation, courage, and the importance of listening to unconventional voices. Photographers captured the moment, and Tommy knew these images would appear in newspapers across the country. But the most meaningful moment came afterward, in a quiet corridor away from the crowds. Colonel Hastings, now a general and heading the Army's Research and Development Division, pulled Tommy aside. "Reeves, I want you to know something. That night in Nevada, when you disobeyed my order and took that Jeep out, I was ready to destroy your career. But you taught me a lesson that's more valuable than any tactical manual. You taught me that sometimes the people we dismiss are the ones with the most important ideas. I've made it my mission to never make that mistake again." He pulled out a photograph and handed it to Tommy. It showed a beach in the Pacific, and lined up along the shoreline were dozens of modified Jeeps, each one equipped with rocket platforms. A new generation of sky hunters, refined and improved, but based on Tommy's original design. Over 300 of these were deployed in the Pacific Theater. Conservative estimates say they shot down over 2,000 enemy aircraft and saved tens of thousands of American lives. Your crazy idea, the one I laughed at, became one of the most effective weapon systems of the war. I'll carry that lesson for the rest of my life. Tommy stared at the photograph, overwhelmed by the scope of what had started as a desperate dream in a Nevada garage. That evening, Tommy stood with his mother and David on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, watching the sun set over the Capitol. His mother, a small woman with silver hair and Tommy's same green eyes, held both her son's hands. "Your father would be so proud," she said softly. "Both of you. You served with honor and came home." David put his arm around Tommy's shoulders. "Little brother, you did more than serve. You changed things. That Jeep of yours is going to be in history books. Kids 100 years from now are going to learn about the mechanic who refused to quit."